Hola, buenos días, soy Nico.
Hello.
I didn't call you, you called me.
And today we are here for another week of content. Well, yes. If you like this kind of content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, share if you care, and choose any Patreon tier if you can, because I understand that it's holiday season and bills are tight. Girl, who you telling? But let's move forward. Today we're going to be talking about Amadeus. I'm sorry, I had to go back and check it. It's like Amadeus, as in like deuces slash Zeus. So I'm just gonna say Amadeus. So today we're going to be talking about an OnlyFans performer that opened up about his failing OnlyFans platform. And surprisingly, what his fans said in retort. So basically, he came forward and said, "My OnlyFans platform is dying, and it's gotten to the point that I'm barely able to scrape by and pay my bills and, pay my rent. It's going to make me have to get a full-time job, and I just didn't expect it to happen this early. I don't know if my content has gotten stale or if I'm just doing this wrong, but I tried to switch up my content to compete with the younger guys and the straight guys that are coming in doing gay for pay, and it suddenly just dropped off, and I'm not understanding where I went wrong." And in that sense, like I always talk about, OnlyFans in general is an oversaturated platform. You really have to do things that are either outlandish or scam to basically stand out and get people's money, or you have to just put out decent content. Nico, I say that because a lot of people consider decent content, oh, I'm just going to put up this tripod, I'm going to get some lighting, and that's going to be it. I make sure I have a good venue, I give visuals, I try to give good lighting, good audio, good etc. And even when I'm not like collaborating, I still try to do things that are like outside the box, because when it comes to the human body and OnlyFans, people expect you to be a product. They essentially expect you to always pump out new content. And as someone who has tiptoed into content creation, girl, it's not gonna happen. I say that strictly because sometimes you aren't, feeling sexy. Sometimes you aren't aroused. Sometimes you don't want to have super happy adult fun time with a complete stranger. So it really halts just depending on where you are mentally, because at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, as your own boss, you are in charge of your business and your finances that roll in. So I personally can relate on that part, but it was funny because his fan base actively told him collaborate with black people. Nico, why do you say that? Because I looked on his page and he looked familiar because I recognized the Adonis like body. But I remember I would go on his page and I would just see white person, white person, white person, white person. I don't think I've ever seen like a person of color darker than a brown paper bag on his page. And that's not saying you have to make strictly black content, but if you want a diverse fan base, you have to diversify your collaborations and or what you're doing. Because he asked how could he change and get people in, and everyone was saying, even his white fans, sleep with black people, sleep with popular USA black performers. That'll get you a bigger platform, that'll get your name around places. And I understand it's difficult to just tell somebody sleep with people, especially if you can tell they don't want to. Nico, why do you say that? All of his scenes are with white men, so it's just safe to assume that he doesn't want to film with black people. And I say that because OnlyFans is like an entrepreneur, venture. You get to decide who you have super happy adult fun time with. So if you are purposely excluding all people of color, we can blatantly see that. I may not have like a sole race that I film with predominantly, but I always make sure black, brown, sometimes I think I did like 2 white scenes. You just gotta incorporate people, natural chemistry, that kind of thing. So I thought that was interesting because when you think about it, usually the quote unquote BBC Mandingo fantasy where black people consistently collaborate with white performers, their platforms tend to die out a lot faster. And I say that because we've seen it time and time again. This guy, we've seen it with D'Angelo Jackson, we've seen it with Rain. It just happens time and time again where if you can tell that if they are only used as like a black fetish, eventually it gets tired. So when that happens, you have to fall back on your core fan base. And if all of your core fan base is just using you as a fetish, it's not going to leave you with anyone that's really in your corner. For example, I do not film often, but my core fan base predominantly black. Nico, I genuinely appreciate y'all, because though I do solo content, I still incorporate it with my personality. I still do speech, and even when I do collabs, I don't do paywalls. I don't do scamming. If I tell you collab is coming out this week, collab will be coming out that week. No extra fees. I just believe people should get what they pay for. So I really feel like my core fan base has stuck around so long just because when I put out something, I put it out. I'm not gonna BS you. I'm not gonna scam you. It's not in me. So in this particular situation, if it's getting to the point that even your white fans are telling you you need to incorporate black people in your content, I feel like you should just take a seat back and actively look at that so you can try to rebrand. But I did think it was interesting how he specified that he actively switched up his platform to try to compete with the newer guys and or the straight men that do little to nothing for your money. And I feel like trying to copy a business model that is meant solely to squeeze out every cent that you can from your customer base without giving them full products and or content is never going to work in the long run. I mean, even though he based it off of these straight men, let's say, for example, we see them now having to dip into actual gay content, James Angel, or having to go into other sex work avenues such as dancing, Grandy Glaze. So, I mean, as you can tell, the scamming model, it only works for so long before people universally go, all right, we're going to move on to somebody that's actually providing something. So once again, I want to say thank you to my fan base that has genuinely been here since day one and has allowed me to properly explore and navigate the sexual landscape and see what I'm comfortable doing, what I want to put out. And I always make sure I give you a quality content, even if it does take me a minute, just because once again, we are still human beings. I'm gonna lump myself into this. Sex workers, performers, YouTubers, we are all still human beings that have limitations and or feelings, and sometimes we are just not up for it. For example, I suffer from like depression and anxiety. I am not always on go. I am not always on, oh, let me get my, saucy time on. So I definitely want people to understand that it's okay to have expectations for something that you're paying money for, but at the same time, still realize that some people are human. That does not mean you have to tolerate shenanigans. If somebody is blatantly playing in your face with your money, girl, alert them. Spread the word. Do not get scammed because somebody had a bad day. But if you see that somebody's slowing down content production, let's say for a week or two, try to be understanding. Try to be, empathetic solely for the fact that they are still human. But him talking about having to get a full-time job as if it's like the worst thing possible. I'm like, before YouTube, before OnlyFans, I had 3 jobs. Nico, I had 3 jobs. I was working around the clock. So trying to make it seem like getting a full-time job is just the end of your existence, it's a little childish. In my personal opinion, this is just coming from somebody who's used to working themselves to the bone. Heck, even on YouTube, I don't necessarily get a week off because the algorithm will drop me and I had to actively climb back up. So even now, I still actively work. OnlyFans is not the only thing that I do. So if you have to get to the point where you're applying for full-time jobs just to supplement the money because the OnlyFans is drying up, that's just a part of the game. Unfortunately, I always stated this even before I started. OnlyFans, adult cinematography, it all has a expiration date. Unfortunately, people like to see new faces. People like to see the new up and comers. They like them younger, unless you have an older, interest. But at the end of the day, it's not going to last forever. So if you have savings, I would definitely suggest investing in a trade. That's actually what I'm doing personally. Nico, I don't come on here and tell you about my personal business, but I'm not one of those people that's just like, oh, the money's gonna last forever. The gravy train always takes a stop. It always happens. So I definitely want to hear your opinions down below. How do you feel about interracial performers complaining that their fan bases are drying up, complaining that they aren't getting the same revenue, they aren't getting the same numbers? Because once again, if they are blatantly telling you, switch it up, try bottoming, try, sleeping with other black people, I would definitely listen to them and attempt to accommodate, because personally, that's where I was, where people were like, okay, we've seen you top, we want to see you bottom. I gave you 2 bottoming scenes. Nico, that's all I had in me, especially because a lot of people were like, oh no, we don't want to see you bottom like that. We want to see you get like pounded and torn to shreds. I'm like, I'm a top. And at heart, I'm a verse top in theory, especially in relationships, but I'm not going to sit here and get drilled to the point that I'm in agony. It's just not in me. And no matter how many people want that one, it's just not going to happen with me. So I feel like you should be able to meet your fan base halfway. If they want to see you bottoming, get a toy, try it out, or do a slow bottoming scene. My first bottoming scene was actually with a Brazilian performer named Jonatas, but I debuted my like Raheem one first, but it's on my OnlyFans. I actually didn't promote it on Twitter just because it's more of a soft, intimate moment rather than like like people normally like to see. So I mean, you just gotta meet people halfway. But yes, I definitely want to hear your opinions down below. Do you feel like interracial performers should start trying to sleep with other Black people to raise their numbers? Because I genuinely feel like that would help if you have a solid fan base, especially from your own community, rather than relying on being a fetish for a different community. But before I continue to rant, I will leave the conversation up to you. Boop. And now for a brief yet sincere shout out to this week's third eye tier subscribers, Southwestern Poppy and Maurice B. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. And this week's live stream discussion will be over diversifying content. It was originally supposed to be over touch starvation, but one of our Patreon members asked for it to be postponed so they could attend. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely tune in.